It's going to sound really, really morbid, but we all die, right? And we've got this container of time that we can invest over.
Yeah.
And the longer that we delay that, the lower our returns are going to be.
All right, hey everyone at home, welcome back to another Pathway Property podcast. Today we got a top tier, really awesome broker with us today from Hack Mortgages, Imtiyaz. I just call him Imti. We're going to be covering a lot of stuff. We're mainly going to be talking about starting your portfolio. So if you're a young investor, someone who's looking to start building wealth, or you're early on in your journey, highly recommend watching this or listening to this podcast, watching this podcast. If you're someone a little bit older, might not be the one for you if you're already mid to late stage in your podcast. There's heaps of other really good ones out there on our platform. But I think the other people who this would be really useful for is if you're a parent to a child who's in there getting close to that like wealth building age, somewhere between like 17 to 25 or even 17 to 30. They're starting to think about building their wealth, and this is, I guess, an opportunity for you to see how you can help them and the options that are available for them so that you can help them in their wealth building journey. But before we get into all of that stuff, Imti, tell everyone at home a little bit about yourself. Give us the intro.
Thanks, Arshad. Firstly, thanks for having me. Really excited to be talking about this because it's a space that I'm really passionate about. Where do I start? I think for anyone listening to this who wants to know a little bit about me, Hack Mortgages was kind of built on wanting to overlap really, really good strategic advice from my personal journey in terms of investing in property, but targeting it towards the younger investor, the first-time investor, the person from a working class background, and giving them access to that strategic advantage that usually is reserved for high net worth clients. So the space that we spend a lot of our time in actually is people who are starting their portfolio that may not have a ton of money in the bank, or they want to change their circumstances, and helping them structure their journey in a way using the right products at the right time to really break that, I guess, generational pattern that they're looking to break.
Beautiful. I think it's super important, right? I think like people who already have a portfolio or are coming from an environment where everyone's got a portfolio, they understand the importance of structuring, right? Like debt structuring, loan structuring, whatever you want to call it. But I think people who don't come from that background, maybe their parents just have been renters their whole life, or their parents just own their own home but don't have anything more than that. For them, it's just like, oh, I just go get a loan and then I pay it off and then that's it, right? They don't understand that debt structuring is, I guess, one of the biggest factors in how much money you'll make, especially if you're going down the property direction, right? So I hear this term get thrown out a lot: structuring, debt structuring, loan structuring. What does it really mean? Like, for those who are listening at home, it sounds like a bit of a vague phenomenon. Like, if you were to simplify it for like someone who's never bought a property and they're listening to this and they're like, I want to buy a property, what does debt structuring, loan structuring mean?
Yeah, great question. It sounds more complicated than it is. It really is just being in the right loan, the right way, at the right time. And I guess the confusing part for a lot of people is that when they look at home loans, it's always about interest rate, for example. Great example, where the priority for most people is always what's the lowest rate, and that's what I'll make my decision on. Now, being a strategic brokerage and understanding all the policies of the lenders that are available, the lender who has the lowest possible rate actually might be the worst option for you based on what you're looking to do in the future. Whether that be they may not be able to maximize your borrowing capacity, so you can't buy what you want to buy. I know we're going to chat about it in a little bit, but they may not do things like parental guarantor, which can get you into the market really quickly because you're just so focused on rate. And that's what everyone's trained to look up. And so really debt structuring is just being in the right product at the right time that aligns with your goals. That's all it is.
Beautiful. So what are some of the factors that you think people should, I mean, it's not really their job, but like ideally they're a good broker. What are some of the main factors they look at? So I guess one, you mentioned rate, which I guess sometimes people over-fixate on that. Number two is things like how much, like what products they have and how much that will determine how much cash they need to get in. So some banks having products that allow them to get in with like much lower amounts of cash. Then you mentioned borrowing capacity. Certain banks will have way better. I feel like that's one of the biggest ones, right? Especially when you're buying your own home, you look at it, you're like, oh, we can only buy something for 700 because you've only looked at one lender, and then you're like, but we want to buy something for 900, so you delay buying by like 2 to 3 years. And then the market goes up a decent amount in that time. But there was a lender that could have done 900 then. You just needed to look at the right lender effectively. But I guess I feel like those are 3 to 4 of the biggest ones. Are there any other like points that you think are really useful or like that you look out for when you're looking at a client's lender selection?
I think it just comes down to what the client's really looking to do and understanding where they want to go. Some clients may want to, let's say, for example, buy 1 or 2 properties and they'll be able to create their wealth just in that container, for example. Some other clients might want to have 5+. They may have restrictions around what's coming up in their life. You know, they might want to have a family one day. They might be getting married. They might want to travel. All of these lifestyle factors and where they want to go long term all tie into that product selection. And it's something that gets neglected very often. Often what will happen is someone will go to get a loan and the answer that they're looking for is can they do it? And that's the answer that the lender or broker will provide them. It'll be yes or no. Yeah, you can. What we really want to do is understand, should they do it? And if they should do it, how do they do it? It's not just the can they do it.
Yeah, it's like what are the different ways of doing it and which is the best way to do it, right? Because it's like, I guess in most scenarios, there will be multiple ways to get the basic outcome that they want, right? But which is the most optimal, right, is important, not just what is the easiest. Like, I mean, if it's a bank, a bank is never going to say, even if they can't do it, the bank is never going to say, hey, by the way, there's that other product out there.
Go down to the other broker down the road.
But a broker might be like, a broker, I guess, a not great broker, they might look at it and they might be like, one, they might, if they're not that good at their job, they might know all of the options, right? Number two, if they are good at their job and they do know all the options, that sometimes I've seen it before, they'll go with the option that's easiest for them, 100%. But it might not be most optimal for the client. It's just like, okay, there's a quick, easy win. I'll just get it done. And like, you know, it's less work for me. And it's not bad for the client, but it's not as good as it could have been, right? And then I guess the ideal broker is you want someone who shows you how you should do it, what are the options, and then tells you which is the best option, even if it's not the easiest for them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, very fair. I think the point that you hit nail on the head is around the ease of putting a client with a product that answers the can they question, right? First home buyers and first time investors in general, they're more work. From a broker's perspective, because they need more education, they need more hand holding, they need more strategy, and to be taken down the path. And that often results in them being neglected or pushed to the side or given the easy option because they need extra effort, which is why it's important for them to look out for someone who specializes not just in investment, but in the space and the life stage that they're at.
Yeah. Because I guess like from a broker perspective, right, a person who already has 8 properties and he's refinancing with you to buy then a $4 million commercial property or whatever, he is worth a lot more than in the short term, and probably even over the long term worth a lot more than someone buying their first property, right? So you want to find with someone who's aligned and specializes in that space. Okay, that's brilliant. So that's, I guess, what people should be looking out for, which is super important. Let's jump into, I guess, the main topic for today, right, which is young investors. We're going to talk about some of the options available for them, the pros and cons of those options. But before we do, I really want to talk about the importance of starting young and what you've seen in that space. I did a podcast, I think it was a couple of months ago now, with one of our clients who's 26 and he's got, I think 9 or 10. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
I've lost track, right? We've helped him with a few of his recent purchases and he started very young, right? And now he's probably worth like 5 mil plus at 26
Yeah.
as just like a full-time employee, right? Like,
Crazy.
I mean, he's not like low income. He's, I'd say, like decent income, but it's not like he's running a business making like crazy money, right? So he's done really well for himself. What's the importance of starting young, right? Like starting as soon as you can.
It's going to sound really, really morbid, but we all die, right? And we've got this container of time that we can invest over.
Yeah.
And the longer that we delay that, the lower our returns are going to be. As much as, we can talk about buying the best property or, where to look or what to buy, time usually is the most overarching impact maker. The longer you're in the market, generally your return's better. And the importance of starting young is just to give you as much time as humanly possible. The other part of that is that when you're younger, yes, you're on a lower income than you would be, 10 years or 15 years into your journey. But by starting earlier, you still will end up in a better position. You're also not dealing with life headaches, right? If you're starting in your early 20s, you're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have a whole bunch of stress going on in your life. And I think more importantly as well, it locks in those behaviors really early that compound over time. You view every decision through the lens of, does it help me achieve my goal long term? And that crossover into your day-to-day life is actually priceless. So I think it's two-part, it's financial, but it's also mental.
Yeah, brilliant. Honestly, I agree with all three of those, right? It's like hit the nail on the head. Number one is you just can't underestimate the power of compounding, right?
No.
And I like the way you described it, right? Because it's like, I guess, I don't know, for people who aren't watching, who are listening, right? Compounding, it's kind of like this, it's this exponential curve, right? And I think just psychologically, the way that people imagine it is when they think about, okay, if I delay my journey, right, that I'm just pushing the curve further along.
And it's just this straight line that moves
Yeah.
further along, right?
Exactly. But you're actually, the years that are being removed, because like you mentioned, the age that you're going to die is like, it's just going to happen, right? So you're not removing the first few years, because those still have to happen, because you have to start at some point. You're removing the last few years, right? And those last few years are the most powerful, right? Like your first year, you might make 40K of growth. Your last year, if it's a 40-year growth or a 40-year plan or a 30-year plan, your last year, you might be making like 500K, right? So if you delay by 1 year, you're not losing on the 50K because that of growth that happens in the first year, because that still has to happen when you eventually start. You're losing the 500K at the end.
back end.
Exactly, right? So I think like when you conceptualize that, then it's like, oh my God, the amount of money I'm leaving on the table by delaying each year is huge, right? And I think the second point that you brought up is super important. It's when you're young, you got so much, your risk tolerance is so much higher, right? So there's so much more that you can do. We've had clients who, we've bought in markets that have performed really well, but we've told them up front that these are like higher risk markets, right? You know what I mean? It's a market that like if we had a 55-year-old client or a 50-year-old client, we'd never take them to those markets.
Exactly right.
But because you're 22, right, you can go into this market, it's high risk. If it doesn't go perfectly, that's all right. You got time to recycle again. Now, in all the cases we've had, obviously we've done the due diligence and the data has worked out and the market has followed the predictions of the data. So like those clients have performed really well, but the probability of them performing well wasn't as high as, if we're buying someone who's 50 years old, we're going to buy in a market with like 99.9% confidence because they only have one growth cycle left in them. Right? So it's like you can do these things that almost create like a crazy launch pad, right? It's keep your costs low, do things like I've had young clients who they buy a property as their own home and it's like a 5-bed and they rent out the 4 other bedrooms and the rent is paying the mortgage and profit on top of that, right? So there's heaps of stuff that you can do while you're young because your risk tolerance is so much higher,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, I guess a lot of people, they use that higher risk tolerance to go into things that are crazy high risk,
Yep.
like random niche coins in crypto.
Or they just spend their money on everything and anything. And
Yeah, exactly, right? But I think if you get that balance right, you can do really well. Beautiful. So that's the importance of starting young, which
Yep.
I think it's almost a no-brainer, right? Like everyone says it, right? And I think everyone kind of knows it, right? Because it's said so often. But I feel like it's one of those things where you just got to keep saying it, right? Because it's like everyone knows it, but not everyone actualizes it, right? And eventually they're going to have that moment, right? Where they're going to be like, I've delayed too long,
yeah,
right? To me, unless I guess like, if you're below the age of 21, then it's like, okay, you're chilling.
Yep.
But I think every year above the age of 21, you've delayed too long,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like if you're 24, you're listening to this, you need to be like, okay, I need to get started now. If you're 29, if you're 35, if you're 50, whatever age you are, above the age of 21, you just need to lock in now, right? And get things started. Whatever started means for you. It might mean I need to start saving. It might mean I need to start investing, whatever it is. But yeah, starting early, I'd say that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some of the options that people have to start early, right?
Sure.
There's a few different ones. I want to focus on one.
Yep.
I call it privilege leverage,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is using the parent guarantor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something that's not available to everyone naturally.
No.
We'll talk about what the criteria are,
Mm-hmm.
right? But before we get into this, before we get into the specifics of how it works, I think one of the things that I see quite often, especially people from specific cultural backgrounds, is they have this idea of, look, I want to make it by myself without like the help of others.
Yep.
Look, and that's fine, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm just from a different culture. At the end of the day, it's your decision. But I think one thing I'll say is, especially where we're getting to in Australia, I'd say in Sydney these days, it's almost impossible to make
Yeah.
it by yourself unless you're like ultra high performing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, the top 1 to 5% of performers will be able to make it by themselves and,
Yep.
like do really well over the long term. Majority of the other people, like your middle class, your people, who are in average paying jobs, is very hard to even, I guess, do the basic things of buying a house that you really like by your mid 30s to 40s,
Yep.
something like that, right? So there's a lot of, it's just harder,
Yeah.
right? Like from a money perspective, I'd say like Sydney is Australia on hard mode,
Yep.
right? Like Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth I'd say Melbourne right now is on easy mode,
Yeah.
right? Adelaide, Perth, mid, right? Like Brisbane's a little bit harder as well. So it just depends where you're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say at the end of the day, it's up to each individual, but really think about this as an option, right? Like being able to use all the hard work that your parents have done for you, right? Because at the end of the day, I guess it varies from culture to culture, but in my culture, majority of the parents, they're just building their wealth for their kids.
To pass it on.
Right?
Yep.
So it's like eventually you're going to get that anyway.
Yep.
Right? But where things are with current healthcare, you're probably going to get it when you're 50.
Yeah.
Right? Does it really matter? Like when you're 50, you probably, like, it's not going to make a huge difference to your life. Right? It's just like a little bit of a cash injection that maybe you pay off your debt and then you have an earlier retirement. Right? But the age of like 20 to 50, you're not really getting the value of all the hard work that they've done. And I'd say this is one of the easiest ways to get that value without putting too much of a burden on them. So long story short is, if you're listening to this, I'd say from a philosophical perspective, maybe just revisit the idea of working with parents to be able to do something, right? Let's talk about what it actually looks like, right? Because I think it's something that people, they hear Guarantor and they're like, oh, it sounds like a really big, scary thing. Just give us the introduction. Guarantors, what does it mean? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. So parental guarantor loans, what will happen is usually when you're purchasing a property, you need to put in cash for a deposit and stamp duty and costs and all that sort of stuff. Depending on what you're doing, that could be anywhere from 5% to 22% cash in the purchase. What a guarantor loan allows you to do is to access the equity in your parents' property as security to purchase your new property. An example of that would be, let's say you're buying a property that's 500,000. We'll use very easy math. Let's say stamp duty and costs, it all ends up being 550 all up. If you were to do conventional lending on that, you might need to put in $50,000 worth of cash and then borrow the rest. If you had access to, I know we're going to touch on it a little bit, like the first home guarantee scheme where you put in a 5% deposit. With the guarantor option, you can borrow the full 550 instead of just the 500. So you could put in no cash. And that's not me saying don't have any cash in the bank and go use a guarantor loan. It just means you'll have cash in the bank for a rainy day when you go to do this, and you can do it sooner.
Yeah.
The way that it works with the parents' house, and we can dive into it in a little bit more detail, is that the bank will put what's called a charge or a guarantee on the parents' house. But in terms of order of priority from the bank, it's secondary. So they'll always go for the first security. That's their highest priority, which is the property the client's buying. And then secondary to that, the bank just basically has backup equity in case they need it, which is just tagged onto the parent's property. But I would be keen to kind of break down a few key concerns that parents usually have.
Because I think a lot of parents that hear this and they're like, oh, if we miss one payment, they're going to come take my house
100%.
away. What does the timeline look like, right? So let's say you're a parent, you guarantee your kid stops making the payments.
Yep.
Right? What happens between that and them coming to your house, right? And how long is that timeline? Like what actually needs to happen for them to come and be like, okay, look, we're going to be looking at taking the parents' house away.
And I think this is really valuable for both the kids and the parents to listen to. It's a conversation that I have with every guarantor client is realistically, the bank may never get to the point of taking the parents' property because of all the steps that are involved before that. So if, let's say, the kid misses a payment, the first time they miss a payment, the bank will tell the parents. Notification will go to the kid. Notification will go to the parents. Hey, repayment's been made. Guarantors get put on notice on day one that they're at risk. Usually, parents will reach out to the kid, whack them over the back of the head. What are you doing? Problem gets solved. Then from there, the bank will continue to try and negotiate with the client.
The kid.
So the kid, right? So for the purpose of the rest of the example, client, kid.
Yeah, done.
Now, the bank will try and negotiate with the client. They'll try and find out if there's something that's gone wrong. Do they need help with financial hardship, for example? And the banks are really accommodating in that situation. If they've lost their job or they need a reduced payment plan, the bank will work with them because they're encouraged to. So there's that step. Then let's say the kid's gone off to Bali and, can't be heard of ever again.
Just decided not to pay.
Off into the abyss.
Yeah.
The bank will continue to notify the parents that the client's gone MIA. The bank's next step will actually be to generally progress legal proceedings against the client.
How long does that period go for before they? I mean, like, it doesn't sound like there's a hard number, but what does that usually look like? Is that like a 3-month thing, a 1-month thing, a 12 months? Like, I'm assuming you haven't had any clients where this happened. At least I hope not. But from your understanding, what's that general time period?
Yeah, great question. And for anyone listening to this is something that a broker usually wouldn't have the answer to. The reason why I'm able to break this down is my background before the broking business, where I was in this space, in the customer advocacy space for one of the big four banks. So this was kind of what we dealt with every single day. Usually that timeline could be anywhere from 6 to 9 months at a minimum starting point. Escalation with most of the majors doesn't start until an account's 180 days delinquent. So 6 months. And then that's when they'll start issuing letters of demand, threatening defaults, and then potentially pursuing a statement of claim in court. And then after that, the next stage is actually repossessing the client's property and then selling it as mortgagee in possession.
Yeah.
The banks will add their legal fees to it and all that sort of stuff. But once they sell the property, provided it's in a market that hasn't completely tanked,
Yeah.
the bank will recover 80 to 90%
Yeah.
of their funds.
If it's gone up, hopefully 100% of
Yeah,
the funds.
exactly. If it's gone up, 100%. Bank walks away, not happy, but they've gotten their money, right?
Yeah.
If there's a little bit of funds left over, the bank potentially will, and this is me kind of getting very in detail, there's limited guarantees and non-limited guarantees. With banks that do limited guarantees, the guarantor will get paid out first. And so once that sale happens, the guarantor's free.
Yeah.
They're not even going to come after them.
Yeah.
Let's say that's not the situation, and there's, let's say, 50 grand left once that's all said and done. The bank will reach out to the parents and actually try and negotiate a payment plan with them.
Okay.
Or give them the option to pay that in cash or sort it out however they want to.
Yeah.
And work proactively with them.
Yeah.
The only time that I've ever seen a property now be put at risk is if there's no cooperation there, the parents ghost, and the monetary amount
is huge.
is worth the reputational damage the bank might take on.
Yeah, because if it's like 20 to 30K, they're probably going to be like, see.
The bank doesn't want the news headline, right?
Yeah.
They don't want.
But if it's like 500K, then they're going to be like, okay.
Yeah, we're getting our money.
Yeah, we're getting our money. Yeah.
And so, the escalation pathway is really, really different. The reason why a lot of parents fear it is that it wasn't always that way, right? It did used to be as soon as a repayment got missed, the bank came knocking at your door. So that changed with a whole bunch of regulatory changes over the last decade, which is why for a lot of parents, their initial fear is the bank's going to take my house. It's not unreasonable. It's actually the truth that they've lived.
And also, I feel like when you consume media in other countries, like, think about like in America or whatever, it's a lot more quicker.
Yeah.
Right?
They're going to bulldoze your house.
Yeah, it's like you're going to wake up and tomorrow your house is not yours anymore. But over here, it seems like there's a very long timeline before you're put at any major risk, right? So it's like, honestly, I'd say ideally the timeline should be irrelevant, because if you're guaranteeing your kid, just make sure that they're not going to disappear on you, right? And if you're a kid using your parents as a guarantor, don't be that kid where you just like disappear on them. But so just to break down the timeline, right? The client, the kid stops making the payments somewhere in between. You're saying roughly 6 months, might be slightly less, slightly longer. After the parents get a notice at the beginning,
day one.
But then at around the, let's say 6-month mark, they still haven't got any payments. They'll go to the parents and they'll say, okay, look, we haven't got any payments, so we're going to be, I guess, taking that property mortgaging.
So at the 6-month mark,
Yeah.
what will happen is letter of demand and escalation will happen with the client still.
Okay.
So the parents haven't even been close to escalated
Yeah.
yet.
Okay. So they will go and take the client's like property, right? Then that will be like another drawn out process where it'll become mortgagee in possession. Then they'll sell that property, and then they will obviously recover the funds from selling that property. Now, any leftover money on the loan that they haven't recovered, then they will go to the parents, and they will work with the parents to come to a solution that's feasible for them. And if the parents are really problematic and are not meeting them halfway, plus the banks look at it as a significant amount, then that's when they will put a charge on the parents' property.
Yeah, essentially. The caveat I'd put on that is that that's industry best practice.
It'll vary from situation to situation.
Yeah.
But this is, I guess, like generally how it goes on average.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, everything over here it'll be circumstantial. Some banks might be a bit more brutal. Others might be a lot more lenient. And I guess that's where it's like having a good broker who knows the guarantor space well is super important. But that's kind of like the general process, right? Okay. Beautiful, right? So that is how it works. Now, I think it's like, I actually think when you look at it, it's super low risk. The timeline is so long.
Yeah.
Obviously, just make sure if you're buying a property as the client, as the child, and even as the parent, make sure to check it with your child that they can actually manage the cash flow, right? Don't buy a property that's going to be putting you, you buy your first home when you guarantor them with it, and the repayments are 60K and their salary is 65K, right? They're not going to be able to do it, right? So it's like, make sure you calculate and you work on the cash flow, right? to ensure that you buy a deal where you can actually manage it, whether it's an investment property or whether it's a first home, right? Let's come to the next question I have over here, and I already know the answer, but I think it's good for those at home. The guarantor, it can be used for investments as well as own home. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Beautiful.
And most people think that it is just for an owner-occupier property.
Yeah.
There's carve-outs with a couple of lenders where you can use it for an investment property.
Yeah.
And then there's another little known tidbit of a hack that most people don't know on top of that.
Yeah.
That guarantor can, as of right now, with a specific lender, it can actually be recycled for multiple purchases.
Like for different kids?
So for the same kid,
Yeah.
buying multiple properties.
Oh, so
And so we can ladder the equity.
yeah.
Well, let's say purchase one,
Yeah.
we use a guarantor,
Yeah.
they pay down the debt,
Yeah.
value of the property goes up,
Yeah.
remove the guarantee.
And then go to the next one.
Yep.
Wow. So what if you're someone who already has 3 properties, right? And now you want to buy a 4th?
Yep.
Right? You can use a guarantor on that. Is that correct? Or
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. But guarantors, they're more so useful for if you're lacking the equity component.
Yes.
They don't really help with the servicing in any real way.
Yeah, they used to. Again, which is why a lot of people will be like, if I add a guarantor, will it increase my borrowing capacity? The answer to that is no for 99% of people. The only exception is people who are high net worth, who might have access to private banking through their parents. And when I say high net worth, I mean their parents are probably on salaries of like $1 million.
Yeah, so it's like almost like ultra high net worth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful, right? So the main benefit over here is you can effectively buy a property with $0 out of your pocket. Not to say that you should have $0 in your pocket, like you mentioned. You probably need a buffer. But if your parents are willing to do it and you're happy with it, then you can get into your first property pretty much ASAP as long as you have the borrowing capacity. Now, how do the banks decide if the parents are eligible for a guarantor? Again, I know it'll be a case-by-case thing, but what are some of the broader facts that they look for?
Yeah, so broader facts, the banks want to see that at least there's roughly about 50% equity in the property. So if the property is worth $1 million, $500,000 worth of debt, give or take. The guarantor component is limited to 20% of the purchase price of the property as well. So that's something that they'll factor in. A few myths in this space is that the parents need to be working. They don't. Another one is that the bank will look at all their financials and their income and outgoings. Some banks won't.
Okay.
And really it just comes down to, is there equity available? And if the bank isn't doing an assessment, the bank will want the parents to get independent legal advice done. Which is something that I believe in as best practice. Yes, it's an extra cost, but
it's not crazy, like 1 to 1.5K.
Yeah, like it's $1,500, right, in the grand scheme of things. But what it does is it ensures the parents actually know their rights. And protecting the parents through these transactions is probably our highest priority. Because the kid's excited, right? They're they're getting to go buy a property with hardly any deposit down. It's actually about how do we safeguard the parents. And when it comes down to the policy side of it, it's very, very accessible. It's a lot more accessible than it was before. So long as there's equity there, so long as it's reasonable for them to do it, banks won't look at their income and outgoing. Some banks will be okay with people who have retired and are just on a pension. That kind of falls into more of a case-by-case basis, but it's definitely something we've gotten done. But overall, very, very accessible.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I actually think, so there's some kids who are probably going to be listening to this and they're probably going to go speak to their parents. But I actually think if you're a parent and you're listening to this or you come across Guarantor, go speak to your kids. If you're a parent and you have a child 19 to 30, go and say, hey, look, it's important you start building your wealth. Right? I guess some parents, we've had some clients where the parents do like a gifted deposit, where they won't guarantee the kid, but they'll be like, here's $300,000. Now, look, most parents aren't sitting on an extra $300K, which is fair enough, you know what I mean? But you get some people who are. So this is an easy way to get your kids started, get them into the market, low risk for you. Again, just make sure you have alignment. So I'd say to any of the parents listening, right? Go have that sit down with your kid and be like, okay, do you want to get started? It's almost kind of like locking them into starting to build their wealth so that they then take on more responsibility and go from there.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned that because that's very similar to how my own journey started. And this is a story that I share with clients and parents, more importantly, during this journey, because I think what you touched on in terms of encouraging the parents to have the conversation is actually really powerful. Because what you said earlier around culturally and just in general, like most parents they're not building wealth to build wealth. They're building wealth to pass it on. They want their kids to have a better future than they did. And what the guarantor loan actually allows them to do is to pass that on now and for them to be able to see the benefit to their kid 20, 30 years sooner and see them be able to have that life stage advantage. Like, yes, when the parents pass away, the kids will be left with cash and all of that sort of stuff. But bringing it back to the time thing that we talked about earlier, right? The 20 years have already passed. Whereas that equity in the property is there right now. And so for parents who are thinking of gifting a deposit in the future and they're trying to save to do that, or they're thinking of, when we pass away, we're passing this all on to our kids. If it doesn't financially stress you and the family home's almost paid off and you can give your child the advantage 20 or 30 years earlier and actually not hand them any cash.
Yeah.
Because it teaches them to be responsible, right?
Exactly. You're not just giving them
You're not just giving them cash and go have fun.
Yeah.
You're strapping them into responsibility. And that's exactly what happened with me. When I was in my early 20s, I was useless with money. Me and my mum had a conversation around, what she saw for herself, retirement planning wise and all of that sort of stuff. And we landed on her being able to help me with a guarantor, similar adjacent structure, right? And what that actually forced me to do was get very disciplined with my money, my spending habits, because I knew that I wouldn't have been the person that invested into shares religiously once a month, but I knew that I wouldn't miss a monthly repayment at the end of the month
because it's slightly different, right? Because it's like you'll never missing the repayment is like there's a consequence. Whereas like over here, it's like, maybe I'll just do this trip instead of investing in shares or whatever, right? So it's like that's actually one of the other benefits of property. It actually forces you to save more.
It puts you in an accountability loop.
And I think like one of the things like a lot of younger people will be listening is they'll be hearing terms like discipline and stuff, and they'll be thinking that they have to sacrifice a major quality of lifestyle, right? But the reality is that's not really necessary, right? The more quality of lifestyle you sacrifice, the faster you can build your portfolio. But it just becomes a subjective question. It's like, how much do you want to sacrifice, right? Like I have clients who it's like almost all of their money they funnel. Like I got some clients living at home in their early mid-20s, and it's like they know that they're going to be at home for another 3 to 4 more years. So they're like, look, right now I'm just putting all of my money into investments. I'm keeping like a little bit to go out with friends here and there, but like pretty much nothing, right? And they're scaling really fast. Other clients are like, I want to move out. I want to move in with my partner or whatever it is. And the amount that they're sacrificing is significantly less. So there are options. It's not like, you're locked into, I have to be doing sacrificing a large component.
I need to be eating tuna and rice every single day.
Exactly. You just buy go into like cheaper properties, buy higher yielding deals. There's always deals that fit, right? You could have a portfolio that's putting you 40K out of pocket a year. You could have a portfolio that's putting you 5 to 6K out of pocket per year, right?
Start.
Exactly. Just get started so the compounding effect can happen, right? So that's Guarantors. I'm like a really big fan of it. I think it's like one of the easiest way to get started. You don't have to go through that aggressive savings period where you just feel depressed because it always feels like every time you save, property prices are going up. It feels like a never-ending battle, right? Whereas over here, you get in and you let the dominoes fall, right? Like we've had Guarantor clients we've worked on together, like within a year and a half, they're already at, the value's already gone up 20, 25%, and they can remove the parents as a guarantor. Right? So easy it's like get into the right asset at the right time, you'll make money.
I actually think that you just touched on something really important there that I do want to talk about is the removal of the guarantor. Because I think the escalation is one fear. The removal is another fear that clients and parents both have, is that the guarantor doesn't stay on the property forever. As soon as there's 20% equity in the property, usually we don't even need to refinance the client. We just go up to their existing lender. We get a new valuation done. And so long as the numbers stack up, they'll remove the guarantee. They'll discharge the second mortgage. Parents are released. Off they go. Because, yeah, that client story that you just mentioned, you know, we've had multiple clients, you know, 12 to 18 months between them paying down the debt deliberately and aggressively and the growth that they've gotten. 12 to 18 months, the guarantee is gone.
And then you can use the guarantee for your next kid, right?
Potentially,
Especially if you're one of those people that have like 6 kids, 2 years gap.
Just line them up.
Yeah, just line them up. And then you tell the kid, look, you got to pay off your debt fast, right? Like even if you buy in a market that's not growing at all, right? It'll probably take you 5, maybe 6 years to get it down to 80% LVR, pay off 20%, right? Ideally, you're buying in a market that is growing. I think best case scenario is probably 12 months, right? Worst case scenario, 5 to 6 years to remove them as a guarantor. More realistically, probably somewhere around, I think 3 years is like,
4.
I think like 3 years is like a healthy goal, right? Property grows by like 12%, you pay off 12%, and you remove the guarantor. Okay. So that's guarantors. Let's talk about rent vesting next, right? So I think this is like another big one. Now, rent vesting has become super popular in the last, I guess, I feel like 7 years, especially like post-COVID. It was kind of picking up as a phenomenon, and then COVID made it super popular. Now, my personal belief is during that 2021 to 2024 period, if you lived in Sydney or Melbourne, rent vesting was just like a no-brainer.
100%.
Right? It's like the other markets were performing so well. Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, regional Queensland, regional South Australia, regional like WA, Queensland, and South Australia were just insane in those 3 to 4 years. Right? So one of the facts over here is even if you had to pay stamp duty, they were so affordable. The growth was so juicy.
It was worth it.
Right? And the yields were so high that I'd almost say it was a no-brainer, right? Whereas now, I guess the equation has changed a bit, right? It's like those markets are still performing well, but Melbourne and Sydney markets are starting to pick up, perform a bit better. Melbourne is quite affordable. I think Sydney is still probably not. I mean, I don't think Sydney will ever be affordable ever again, but it's not as unaffordable in comparison as it used to be. So it's like, where's your headspace around rent vesting now? Like, if someone comes to you and they're like a younger person, they got a bit of cash, or maybe they have the guarantor as an option. How should they think about rent vesting?
I think with the change in the market and then the change in all the negative gearing stuff, rent vesting, it's not as much of a no-brainer as it was. There's still value there depending on where you live. So like if the client lives in the middle of, you know, Sydney and, you know, all the houses around them are $2 million and they're happy to rent and share a house, then rent vesting might make sense from a lifestyle perspective. I think if you're in outer ring suburbs where the price difference between a property that you could buy as an owner-occupier and maybe manufacture some equity in. So you buy it as an owner-occupier, you take advantage of no stamp duty, for example, or a low deposit scheme, and you can do a 3 to 4 bedroom conversion, or you can do a granny flat later, or you can uplift the bathrooms and the kitchens and get really good value uplift, and then not have to pay capital gains tax on that. That's probably going to be a more appealing option for people moving forward, but only if they're willing to buy a property and live in a property that has potential.
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, there's a few scenarios, right? So I think number one is if the market that you want to live in is bad from an investment perspective, right? Then just no.
Forget about it.
Right?
Go rent vest.
Just go rent vest. Don't even bother doing it. Save up, pay the stamp duty, whatever. Right? So it's like I got a lot of young doctor clients that they're near the hospital, and it's like there's no way they can afford a house in that suburb. So it's like, oh, I'll just buy an apartment. But like those
don't do that.
markets are like oversupplied.
Yep.
Not even like there's no like low rise apartments or like high rise oversupplied apartments, right?
Yep.
So it's like if the suburb you want to live in, right, you can't afford it's something that makes for a good investment, just Rentvest, right?
Yep.
I'd say that's fact number one. Number two is, I think if you have a guarantor option, I think definitely probably prioritize Rentvesting because you don't, unless the market you live in is really good, right? I'd say even if if you have the guarantor option, if the market you live in is good, but there are rare, like a 7 out of 10, I'd just say still Rentvest and go get a 10 out of 10, right? That's scenario number two. Scenario number three is, I guess, people who don't have, what's it called, the guarantor. They need cash, right? And they don't have enough they only have like, let's say 30, 35K. And we've actually had quite a few clients like this.
Yeah.
And we help them out on structuring our fee so that they can get into the market earlier as well. But what they do is, let's say, we'll take Melbourne as an example, right? They're they got 35K or let's say 40, 45K. So 30K for a deposit. They can get the stamp duty waiver. They can use the first home buyer scheme, right? But that's number one, right? And then, but the area that they live in, at 600K, there's no good investments, right?
Yep.
So we've had clients, they're living in like, let's say, they're living in the city, they're living in Docklands, they're living in Richmond. It's like these are nice suburbs.
Yep.
And they want to continue living there, but there's no way they can, in those apartments, in those areas, the best they can afford is an apartment, right? So one thing you can do in that scenario, and I think this is probably more relevant for people in Melbourne than in Sydney. I think in Sydney, this is a bit tough because you can't really buy anything in Sydney at 600K. That's like a house, right? But what you can do in that scenario, especially if you're in Melbourne, is you go buy something using the first home buyer scheme in a good growth suburb, right? Larger land size, out probably like a further out suburb. And then you just take the L for 1 year, right? It's like you live in it for 1 year. It's not going to be the nicest year. You're going to be further away from friends, so on and so forth. But the amount of the difference that's going to make in terms of your long-term wealth over the next 20 to 30 years is insane. So you live there for, however long you need to live there to, I guess, abide by the rules. And then you move out and you just put it on rent and you just go back to living wherever you want to live.
Yep.
And then that property is renting, you're getting the cash flow from that, and then you're living in the suburb that you want to live in and back to being in an apartment. But you're getting a much better deal in a much better location. I think this is, one of the key strategies that maybe could be more useful than Rentvesting for people without a huge cash amount available. Right? What are your thoughts? Any feedback on that? I don't know. We've been doing that for quite a few clients. What are you seeing clients do in that space?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think, Adelaide, also very similar sort of market where the closer you get to the city, it gets much more expensive, but you can be a little bit out of the city, get something that, and I use the term affordable loosely, but something that you can get into that has good growth potential and just take it as an owner-occupier and do exactly what you said. Depending on what schemes and stuff that you use, there's different rules that are applicable.
Don't have to pay the stamp duty, don't have to pay the LMI, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say is that most people who use the first home guarantee scheme, which is the government 5% scheme, they think that they only need to live in the property for 12 months. That's not the case. They need to make sure that there's enough equity in the property to remove the LMI because the government's guaranteeing the LMI.
The LMI, yeah.
Yep.
So they need to pay off 15%.
Yeah.
Or depends on the...
Yeah. Depends on, but yeah. Essentially, you just move and just pay down the debt as aggressively as you can for 12 months, 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, 12 to 18 months. And
especially when you're at that price point where it's, let's say, a $500,000 mortgage, right? Like the ability to bring down the LVR is a lot easier at that price point.
Yeah. And there'll be growth on the property.
And if you
have a smart broker, they'll take you to a lender where you can get a valuation.
Yeah, exactly right. We'll find an extra, we've been able to massage an extra 5 to 10% out of valuations to get people out of schemes quicker.
Yeah.
And I think also just tying it back to the previous point about manufacturing equity as well, right? Like if you're, best case scenario, like I've had a client remove a guarantee in 3 months. right?
There you go.
Like,
Because they bought it under value, maybe.
bought it under value, had the bone, and bear in mind, like, he's a tradie, right? So had the bones to do a 2 to 3 bedroom conversion. That's it.
Done.
Did those two things, spent 15 grand, uplifted the equity in the property by 100 grand, removed the guarantee.
Done. Easy.
Done.
There you go. Beautiful. All right. I think this one's gone a little bit longer than I realized. I think those are two of probably the best strategies to get in: Guarantor, Rentvesting. But also, I think the 3 big ones that I really like these days. Number one, I think Guarantor. If you have that as an option, almost feel like it's a no-brainer. Use it.
Explore
right? You at least explore it. Number 2, Rentvesting, really solid option. The Guarantor Rentvest combo.
Yep.
Elite. I've got a client. He's on his second year of being a doctor, and he's already about to purchase property number 3. First one, Guarantor. Second one, he used some cash that he had saved while he was in med school and bought a property under a different entity. Now both of those are up like a good 15% or so, and he's using the equity and he's going again.
Yep.
Right? So it's like he's just going harder, and they're all like higher yield deals, so the cash flow is manageable for him as well. So that's I guess Guarantor, Rentvesting, Elite. And then I think if you're low on cash and you don't have a guarantor and you live in a market where there are options, right, and you know that saving enough to Rentvest is going to take you a really long time, then maybe using the first home buyer scheme, buying something, living there, buying something that you can get the stamp duty and LMI waivers, living there for however long you need to live there, 12, 18 months, paying off the debt, and then moving back to wherever you want to be. 3 really good options. If you want to discuss any of them further, feel free to reach out to me, Arshad, or Imti, if you want to discuss the lending side, or you can reach out to me. I'll intro you to Imti. Or vice versa.
Yep, or vice versa.
If need be, just actually, if you want to speak to me, speak to him. He'll intro it.
And it'll just happen.
I'm just having a laugh. But 3 really good options. Reach out. If you're a parent watching this, I highly recommend sitting down with your kids, running them through their options and getting them locked in. Right? It's like it's becoming harder to be middle class if you don't start early.
Yep.
Right? It's kind of stretching into like upper class, lower class, right? So it's like helping your kids build enough wealth to be middle class, or ideally even more than middle class is important, right? It's not as, it's like, I think a lot of older people, they're like, oh, back in my day.
We could just work hard and it would happen.
Yeah, but the reality is it's a lot harder. You just look at things like median income to house price ratio. It's insane.
It's harder.
Right? I think it's objectively harder.
Yeah.
Right? So reach out. More than happy to have a chat, provide some guidance, and help you get going along your way. Imti, any final thoughts, insight?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, Osh. Really good session. Really happy to catch up. And if anyone's listening, investors, first-time guarantee, it's a space that we love to play in every single day and, make magic happen.
Beautiful. Thanks, Imti. Take it easy.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone at home. Bye.